The Murder Shelf Book Club contains disturbing content related to real-life crimes. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to the Murder Shelf Book Club podcast. I am your host, Jill. This is episode 95, Gilgo. Today, we have a special guest and a dear friend of mine, Christine Dana, from My True Crime Obsession podcast. We just saw each other at CrimeCon 2024 in Nashville, which is another reason I love CrimeCon so much, seeing friends and catching up. This woman is a marvel. Her live feed commentaries have taken her to Gilgo Beach, to the home of alleged Long Island serial killer Rex Heuermann. She is the authority in my mind on all things LISK. And we are going to really get into the Long Island serial killer case today by someone who has walked the turf. And I'd like to introduce you to Christine Dana. Hey, Christine, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much.
I figure you are the LISK person that I know.
Thank you.
Well, it's so true. I mean, it's your neck of the woods, and you're on it. I can't keep up with all the crap going on in this world. It's terrible.
And let me tell you, there's been a lot going on. I was in court with him last Thursday, and since then, there's been even more stuff that's transpired. And so, yeah, it's crazy.
Tell me how you got into all of this.
Well, obviously, I live on Long Island, and it's been something that's been ongoing for quite some time now. I guess with Shannon Gilbert going missing on May 1st, 2010, it hit the news because with that one, her mother got involved, Mary Gilbert, a couple days after Shannon went missing. Shannon went missing in an area of Long Island called Oak Beach, which is a sleepy little beach community. It's very secluded. It's very difficult to get there. You have to cross over a bridge, and it's almost on like a island in itself. It's like, an island off of Long Island. It's actually part of Fire Island. Apparently, Shannon Gilbert went there on the night or the early morning hours of May 1st, 2010. She was, a sex worker. She was there to meet a man named Joseph Brewer. She went missing that night. And then it hit the news because she had family, obviously, that was very concerned about her going missing. And her boyfriend at the time was very concerned about her going missing. And they went back to Oak Beach to try and trace what her last steps and what may have happened there.
Right.
She went missing. The way her mother was notified was that she received a phone call from a man named Dr. Peter Hackett, who lived in Oak Beach. And he's a very shady character, a big background story on him, but he likes to integrate himself into different news cases where he's not necessarily supposed to be involved. And
I was going to ask you if you thought he was one of those who's a publicity hound who just wants to be in the middle of everything going on, and here this girl goes missing in his backyard, and I just don't think he could help himself.
Yes, that's definitely true, but there's more to it than that.
Tell me.
Yeah, Dr. Peter Hackett actually worked for Suffolk County Police Department. He was a medical examiner. He likes to boast about himself. I mean, he claims that when Flight 800 went down back in 1996 off the coast of Long Island, that he was there recovering bodies and, he was saving people from the water. There was no one to be saved. I mean, unfortunately, so many souls died in that plane crash. There were no survivors.
Oh, boy.
Kind of, pretended that his role was so important. Well, Suffolk County, it hit the media. Suffolk County Police Department basically fired him and said, listen, hey, you're making up stories. This is crazy. And he was a medical examiner. He is a doctor. I mean, if you listen to all the rumors that circulate and stuff and what was going on in Oak Beach at the time, apparently he was like the guy to go to if you needed medicine or any other kind of drugs. You went to Peter Hackett if you lived in Oak Beach. Yeah, he would supply the community with drugs and everything else. But he was also he was the president of the Oak Beach Association, which is important because he actually was in control politically of that town. He was in control of the video cameras. And one of the things that's important to note, to get into Oak Beach, you have to pass through a security gate. And there are cameras there, and he was in charge of the security gate. So it's supposedly Shannon Gilbert, when she was running for her life that night, trying to escape from Oak Beach, had ran past the security cameras. Unfortunately, there is no documentation of that. There is no videotape of that because the videotape was either taped over or went missing a couple days after Shannon went missing. There were depositions. He was in depositions. Dr. Peter Hackett, he lied about what transpired that night. He has different varying stories. And then he gets on the phone and he calls Mary Gilbert a couple days after Shannon went missing and said, I run a wayward home for girls and I haven't seen Shannon in a while. Do you know where she is? Now, how did he know Mary Gilbert's number? How did he get a hold of her? Why? Yeah. So a lot of questions come up. I mean, it's very scary to think about him.
That's ballsy. I mean, here this girl goes missing. Her family's frantic. They're out at Oak Beach. They're looking for her. And this guy inserts himself, which we know can be a characteristic. Inserting yourself into the investigation. And he messes with don't mess with the family.
Yes.
Do not mess with the family.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, sadly, Mary didn't even know that she was missing. And here, he is calling her and reaching out to her. I mean, to find out that way, And now, to compound the situation, when Shannon was eventually found and her remains were found, I want to say in December of 2011, but they were found about a year and a half later, so on December 13th, 2011. They were found about 50 yards behind Peter Hackett's house in the marsh, in the swamp, in the brush. For anyone that's very unfamiliar with that area, it lies right along the Atlantic Ocean, the Great South Bay. There's a lot of brush. It's very difficult to run through that.
It is inhospitable.
Yes.
It really is.
But here her remains were found, about a year and a half later, 50 yards behind Peter Hackett's house. Is that a coincidence that she just happened to be found there? She was found there, and then her personal belongings, her pocketbook, her clothes were found just 20 feet away from where her remains were found. Now, the narrative, I should say, that Suffolk County Police Department put out was that she got tangled up in the brush, that she didn't know where she was, which was true. She was disoriented, and that brush kind of borders Ocean Parkway, which is the main thoroughfare, the main roadway to get in and out of Oak Beach. So she probably heard traffic and was heading towards the highway. But it's so hard to get through that. It's so thick. I mean, you're dealing with all sorts of wildlife and just plants, and it's not a swamp. It's kind of like brush. I don't know quite how accurately to describe it, but there's no way to get through it. You could only get a couple feet in before you get tangled up. But they claim that that's what she did, that she was running and that for some reason she took off all her clothes and put it down beside her, and then she got tangled up in the nude, and that's where she was found. So it's very disturbing. It's just, I feel for her family.
It's inexplicable. And they talk about drug use and stuff. Again, if you're looking for the highway, if you hear the sounds and it's very dark, and I'm pretty sure it's very dark out there, you may not realize what you're running into.
Yeah. Now, you had mentioned drug use. I don't know that she was incoherent that night.
Yes.
Listen to the police tape. She was scared. This was a woman who was scared. She was running for her life. And the Suffolk County Police, before they released these police tapes publicly, said she wasn't scared. She was calm on the phone. You listen to the police tape. It's very incriminating. There's a lot of information on there that just does not go along with what Suffolk County Police Department is putting out there. Yeah.
I listened to the 911 call, and that is exactly what I thought. She's scared.
And there are people like you and I who have listened to this police tape over and over and over again and enhanced the audio. Like, there are things that she says in that police tape, like, they're coming after me, meaning more than one person. And then there are other things where she's talking to her driver, okay, a man by the name of, his last name was Pack, Michael Pack. Yes, Michael Pack. Talking about him, he's another shady character. Michael Pack was waiting in the limousine. Michael Pack was her ride. Michael Pack was the one that was supposed to protect her. Basically, what happened was after she was with Joseph Brewer goes out to Michael Pack and says she won't leave the house. So now Michael Pack goes into the house. She's crouching behind a couch. She's on the phone with Suffolk County Police Department. She's scared. Michael Pack is trying to coax her out of the house. And if you listen to that police tape carefully, she says something along the lines of, you knew about this, you were in on this. So that's pretty scary. You have to wonder what was going on in that house and what led her to get on the phone with the police. And she's a prostitute. So think about that. You're a prostitute. Now you're calling the police, knowing that you are going to admit to the police that you're engaging in prostitution and could be arrested for that. Put yourself in her shoes. She's going to the police because she's scared for her life and she feels like she has no other option.
Well, exactly. Because who would expose themselves to possible arrest? You'd be weighing those options and saying, no, someone's going to hurt me here. And the girl goes missing.
Yes.
Something went on that night.
Yes.
Something went on.
And it's very difficult to talk about Rex Heuermann and LISK and the Gilgo Beach killings without talking about Shannon, because she was the key to all of this. Actually, I should say her mother was the key to all of this. God bless her mother. Unfortunately, her mom passed, and there's a lot that went on in that family. That family was totally destroyed after Shannon when Gilbert went missing. But her mother had the fortitude to go there and find out what happened to her daughter and alerted Suffolk County Police Department and stayed on top of them. And so people went out, search parties went out looking for Shannon Gilbert within Suffolk County Police Department. And it was a retired police officer. He worked with the canine unit. He was walking his canine dog. And this was around, I guess, December of 2011, when he started to discover the remains. There were human remains found alongside the road on the north side of Ocean Parkway. And so thinking about that, now Suffolk County Police Department has to come out. The medical examiner's office comes out. It's not Shannon Gilbert, but that launched the discovery of the Gilgo Beach 4.
Exactly.
Yes. So you had Megan Waterman, Amberlynn Costello, Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Melissa Bartholomew, who are considered the Gilgo Beach 4. And they went missing well before Shannon. This opened up a whole can of worms. This opened up the whole case. I mean, now you're not only dealing now with Shannon Gilbert, you're dealing with 4 other victims.
And a lot more than that, because now they start looking in the area and it's like body. It's oh my God.
And I believe there were 9 in all. So now not only did you have the Gilgo Beach 4, you had Fire Island Jane Doe, who was an unidentified victim, number 9, who wound up turning out to be Karen Brigada.
Yes.
You also found other body parts, not necessarily all human remains intact, but you found limbs, that of Jessica Taylor. Yes, you had Valerie Mack. So now you're really dealing with a huge situation here that Suffolk County can't simply ignore. Also, I want to note that it kind of put a spotlight on Oak Beach and the residents of Oak Beach.
This is the scrutiny you want. That, there's a serial killer in Oak Beach in our neighborhood, our little contained, quiet, gated community. And suddenly, I mean, for the poor people who live there, who had nothing to do with any of this, I can sympathize.
Yes. But, I want to describe to your audience, though, Oak Beach, so that they get a real sense of this community. Like I said, it was a secluded community. You had to get through a security gate. They were very much an entity unto themselves. You had to have wealth to live in Oak Beach because it was right off of Fire Island, but it was a secluded community. Thinking about that, these people lived their lives the way they wanted to live their lives. They did what they wanted, when they wanted, however they wanted, and nobody was watching. And there was a lot of things that went on in Oak Beach that nobody really knew about because they were just very undercover. Here they are living their lives, free for all, and then all of a sudden this happens, and now the spotlight is on them, and things are starting to come out about the residents that live there, and it's not good. The publicity was not good. A lot of the key players, people who Shannon came in contact with that night, left the community. The media did not portray that community in a good light, and for good reason. These people were, for lack of a better word, they were pissed off that the media was there. There were people that lived there that, yes, had prostitutes. There was rumors of sex parties that went on in that community.
Mm-hmm.
And now all of a sudden everything erupts, and all of a sudden their cover is blown, and all this stuff is happening, and now everybody's on Long Island's finding out about it, and so it wasn't good. But that's how I first got involved in the case, with, I guess, Shannon Gilbert going missing. And then you had a police detective that was working on the case, Richard Dormer. He was bringing attention to it, and he's like, at first they declared her deceased before even finding her body.
Oh, I did not know that.
There were a lot of mistakes that were made. You haven't found her yet, and yet you're saying that she's dead. And then they're saying, don't worry, there's no serial killer around, people shouldn't go into panic mode. And I don't know. Just there was a lot that went on in Oak Beach.
It looks like they may have misspoken somewhat.
Yeah.
By being so nice and gracious to them. The missteps, on top of everything, you've got all of the police corruption going on there.
Yeah. So it's very difficult to talk about this case without mentioning James Burke.
Yeah.
James Burke was a police chief. He rose through the ranks. And just to give you a little history of James Burke, he grew up in St. James, and there was an infamous murder that took place in St. James on April 20th, 1979, and that was the killing of a teenage boy named John Pius. His body was found in St. James. How does James Burke get involved in all this? Well, they were talking, it was all the talk of the town. James Burke claims to have heard that they implicated themselves and said that they were responsible for this crime. There was a young prosecutor at the time who was prosecuting this case, and he knew that if he could get a conviction in this case, that was going to make his career. And his name was Thomas Spoda. So Thomas Spoda says to James Burke, if you testify in this case, I will make sure I take care of you. I'll move you up through the ranks. If you want to become a Suffolk County police officer, you stick by me, I'll take care of you. And so James Burke testified in court. The 4 boys were convicted of this crime. They went to jail. They served jail time. And I don't know how much they were necessarily involved. I mean, I can't get into the whole John Pius case right now, but there's a lot of controversy swirling around that case. I mean, they were convicted because of, number one, because of James Burke's testimony, but also there were the police interrogated these boys and coerced them into confessing. The Suffolk County Police was very proud of their crime solve rate. But a lot of their, murder cases that were solved through police coercion. And so there was a lot going on there, and how much of that was on that. Yeah. There's a great book, if anybody's curious about James Burke, and there's the John Pius case and other cases on Long Island that he's associated with. It's called Jimmy the King by Gus Garcia Roberts. And it's an excellent book. I highly recommend it. It gives you real insight into the Suffolk County Police Department.
Yes, I haven't read all of it yet. I've got halfway through it. Yes. Jimmy the King. Yeah. Yeah,
very good. Excellent book. I actually met him, Suffolk County, East Hampton had a Whodunit Festival, and he was there back in April, and I got the opportunity to meet with him and speak with him. He was great. Now, James Burke, 14 years old when he testifies in court, and he becomes Thomas Spoda's right-hand man. He basically was hanging out at the Suffolk County Police Department with and he's only like a teenage boy. He's rubbing shoulders with all these people, and he moves up through the ranks. He became a New York City police officer, but he really wanted to get a job in Suffolk, and he had the right connections. And after a couple of years of doing, on the job, he wound up getting transferred, or he applied for Suffolk County Police Department, got the job, moved up through the ranks. If you look at his history, this is a man who actually would associate with prostitutes. His girlfriend was a prostitute, Loretta Rittenbacker, and he would have sex with her in police cars. And he did crack with her, smoked crack with her in a house in Ronkonkoma. Here this man knew the right people, kept the right people around him, and wound up moving through the ranks up to becoming police chief. Now, Internal Affairs opened up an investigation on him before he got promoted to police chief because they knew that he had a pretty nefarious background, that if they didn't do investigation on him, people were going to call it into question. But
Right.
everything was swept under the rug. He kept the right people around him, police that were like screw-ups, but, they were given a second chance. They called police officers that were friends with him his palace guard, if that kind of gives you a sense of what we're dealing with here.
Well, if they've screwed up and he's pardoned them, being Jimmy the King,
yes,
they're now beholden to him.
Exactly.
Salaries, their paycheck, their careers, they become his minions. Yeah, his palace guard. Exactly.
Yeah. So, they owe him his life. And if you ever crossed him, James Burke, oh, God help you. Yeah, you would lose your job. You would lose your pension. He would destroy you. He would destroy your life. Yeah. Sometimes he would put recording devices on police cars of police that he suspected were going to do something to go against him. I mean, this is a man that had so much power. He was in power, unfortunately, when Gilgo Beach happened. He was police chief, and the FBI wanted to come in and offer their services, and because Shannon Gilbert crossed state line. She came in from Jersey City.
Who does
the FBI wanted to get involved, and James Burke wouldn't allow it. And I think part of the reason people are like, well, why wouldn't he allow it? Why wouldn't he allow it? Like, was he involved? And so his name was always touted for a number of years as being a suspect in the Gilgo Beach killing, or knowing or killing Shannon. Or I've never believed it, but I think a lot of the reason why he did not want the FBI there was because once the FBI started uncovering things, they may have uncovered a lot about James Burke. And he didn't want to be under the microscope and have his whole life dissected. He wanted to do what he wanted to do, and that was it,
There's a lot there to find. I have heard that he was involved in some of these sex parties.
Yes.
And who else is involved in sex parties? Rex Heuermann.
Yeah.
Allegedly.
This is all allegedly, yeah.
I really do wonder. I have no idea how big that particular swinging community is, but how big could it be that two people who we know are involved in sex parties in the same area within 40 minutes of each other aren't running into each other at sex parties?
We're trying to make the connection between Heuermann and Burke and whether or not they knew each other. As of right now, I can tell you that I don't see any connection. Who knows what the future holds in store? I mean, God bless the current administration that is in Suffolk County Police Department. You have Suffolk County District Attorney Ray Tierney, and I have to give him props because he is just doing an amazing job. I mean, this case should have been solved many, many years ago, and unfortunately, because of the police corruption, because of other factors that were involved, it was stalled for a number of years. But Ray Tierney is doing such a great job with really cracking down and releasing information and getting the search warrants and everything else that he needs to do to get this case solved. Now we have Rex Heuermann as our chief suspect, and he's in jail right now, awaiting trial. And they have the DNA evidence to convict him. So let's hope that happens.
Again, I totally agree with you. God bless that man for just working the evidence. But a lot of what I've read about the cell phone data, that goes back 15 years.
Oh, yes.
And it was there. You're right. This case could have been solved then. The eyewitness who, I believe it was Megan Waterman, saw her getting into such and such a vehicle.
Yeah, that was Amberlynn Costello. So
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Amberlynn Costello had lived in West Babylon at the time. I think it was on America Avenue or something like I don't have the exact address on the top of my head, but it was September of 2009. What happened was she was doing an in-service call with Rex Heuermann. In-service meaning that Rex Heuermann was going to come to her house and they were going to do the transaction at her house. She lived with a gentleman that was like a boyfriend, at the time. And what she did was she basically swindled Rex Heuermann out of his money. So Rex Heuermann comes to the house. She does this whole ploy where she's going to have sex with him. He gives her money, and she did not complete the transaction. As they started to, get involved, the boyfriend comes in and startles Rex Heuermann and says, "What are you doing with my girlfriend? That's my girlfriend, Rex Heuermann obviously runs out of the house. So now the boyfriend has a description of what Rex Heuermann looks like. Okay. Sees the vehicle that Rex Heuermann was driving.
There it is.
And I guess a little while later, Rex Heuermann called Amberlynn Costello and said, that wasn't very nice of you. You still owe me. So I believe it was a day or two later that Amberlynn Costello agreed to meet with him again. But this time it was going to be an out call, meaning that she wasn't going to stay at the house, that she was going to travel with Rex Heuermann to a hotel or wherever and complete the transaction. So they meet a little further up from her house on a street corner. He goes to pick her up. And that's the last time that her boyfriend had seen her. She doesn't return within like 48 hours. He goes to the police. He describes everything. He gives a full description of Rex Heuermann, gives a full description of the vehicle that Rex Heuermann was driving. And this is back in 2009, maybe 2010. I may have my years incorrect. But think about that. 2024. Okay, it was, 14, 15 years ago? And the police had this information and didn't really follow up as they should have with this. And they had the cell phone data as well. Cell phone towers in that area. They knew where the calls were coming from, even though he was using burner phones. Yeah, it's very infuriating. And you have to ask yourself why. So let's look at this. Why is Suffolk County Police Department not following up as they should, or not being vigilant in really investigating this case? And it's because, let's be honest, because it was sex workers. For any of your followers, and I'm sure there's a lot of them, they are a population that is often targeted because they're a forgotten population. They are the forgotten victim. It's almost like their life is less worthy because they're, the fact that they are a sex worker, which, bothers me on such a level because these people, they had a life, they had family, and that wasn't their sole job. This was something they did on the side. These people were struggling to make a life for themselves. I'm not going to judge them for what they did. Some people might not hold them in high regard for choosing to be sex workers, but these women were struggling to make a better life for themselves and for their families. And they did come from families. And, oftentimes for me, when I think of a prostitute or sex worker, I think of a woman hanging out on 42nd Street in Manhattan, waiting for cars to pass by. That all changed with the internet and technology. Now these women can work right from their homes, putting ads onto social media and doing meetup. It's not like it was back in the 70s and the 60s and whatnot, and even the 80s. Like, everything changed with technology. A lot of these women had other jobs. This was just extra income for them. Yeah.
The loss of life, of human life, is a tragedy. Every victim should be afforded the respect of being a human being.
I agree.
They weren't excited about these missing women because they were sex workers is offensive. It's that simple. And anybody who goes missing, anybody who is murdered, deserves a robust investigation into what happened, period.
Yes, I agree.
If nothing else, I hope that is some kind of legacy that comes out of this. That we can look back and say, hey, it really changed. And I don't know if we're there yet. I'm with you on that. We are 100% on the same page.
Yeah. And you learn about these women and their backgrounds, and they had rough starts. I mean, poor Amberlynn, I won't get into it too much. She just had a rough life. She wanted so much more, and she was loved. Her boyfriend was in court on June 6th. I saw him there. My heart aches for him. My heart aches for all the victims' families. They love these women. They deserve so much more.
He's still showing up.
Yeah.
He cared enough that he was just in court.
Yeah. Yeah.
What does that tell you?
I know. I mean, and he's had a tough life too, because it's hard. I get emotional because he feels so guilty about the fact that he didn't stop her from meeting Rex that second time. That she went off with Rex. Yeah. And had she not done that, she might be alive today, and he lives with that guilt. It eats away at him, and it's just so sad. It just bothers me because these women deserve justice. Their families deserve justice. They deserve answers, and it's sad. I'm happy that he's behind bars. He was arrested on July 13th, 2023. And it broke in the news, I guess, the next morning. And I'm a school teacher, for your audience, if they don't know. So I was off during the summer, and it was a Friday morning, July 14th, 2023. I decided to sleep late that morning. And what do you know? I wake up and my phone is blowing up. And everyone is calling me, and they're like, Christine, put the news on. News 12 Long Island. They're like, put on the news, check your phone. I'm like, what's going on? They're like, they caught the Long Island serial killer. And I was just mystified. I was like, you got to be kidding me, And Rex Heuermann, the house pops up on the screen. His name is being floated on the media. It was in Massapequa Park. I live about 30 minutes away from Massapequa Park. I literally put some roll-on on. I just throw some clothes on quickly and I go to his house because I feel like I had to be there. I've been there with this case since 2010. I'm like, I've got to go there. I've got to be there. I've got to see this for myself. So I show up to the house, and I don't mean to laugh about this, and it seems comical, but it's tragic also. So when I arrived at the house, there was police tape all around. But there were people out there in beach chairs behind the yellow crime scene tape. It was like going into a Jimmy Buffett pre-concert party. Like, there are people there everywhere, and they're just hanging out. And I was just like, oh my gosh. But it was, a lot of it was people in the community, neighbors. A lot of it were people who were true crime buffs like myself. And a lot of it were people who had been following this case for a number of years. The media was out there in full force. I had met a couple of people there that I still maintain a friendship with today. Kristen Thorne from Eyewitness News was there. She had covered the case at CrimeCon 2023 in Florida, in Orlando. But she was there, and I heard rumors. I was like, oh, he's going to be brought into court at 1 o'clock that day in Riverhead County Court. For anyone that doesn't know Long Island, that's a good 45-minute drive, maybe an hour with traffic. So, I looked at my watch. At this point, it was like 11:30. And I was like, you know what? I think I can make it. So I go from Massapequa Park to Riverhead County Courthouse, criminal courthouse. And I was there when he was arraigned that day, and I was in court with him. People ask me, what was it like? What's he like? What does he look like? Honestly, the only way I could describe him is he's towering. He's 6'6" tall, and he's about as wide. He's just like this big ogre. But the scary part is there's no affect. Nothing on his face, no emotion. In a lot of ways, physically speaking, he almost reminds me of Edmund Kemper, that he's just so big, But there was just no emotion there. And he's being represented by Michael J. Brown, an attorney in Suffolk County. That was his court-appointed attorney. And he's a very good attorney, Michael Brown, so we'll see what happens. But yeah, that's just when all the chaos started that day, And of course, the police were at his house, and investigators were at his house, investigating his house for, I would have to say, at least a month, just with search warrants and just excavating his backyard and his basement and everything else and grabbing everything that they could. And there's been a lot of talk about his house. So that was the house that he was born and raised in. It was his parents' house. His father had passed away when he was 12 years old. He lived with his mother. Had 2 marriages. The first marriage, he was married to a woman named Eileen Ryan. They lived in the house, and then they divorced. And then a couple of years later, he married his current wife, Asa Ellerup. But if you look at that house, Massapequa Park is I would say it's a blue-collar community, but a lot of people in Massapequa Park are civil servants. A lot of firemen, New York City firemen, a lot of New York City policemen. But it's a beautiful community. Even that block. The houses are very pristine. People took a lot of pride in taking care of their houses and taking care of their lawns. And then you come to Rex Heuermann's house. And this man is an architect. And his house is an absolute dump. People would avoid his house on Halloween because they thought it was creepy. And it's just, I don't think the house has been redone, the outside of the house or the inside of the house for that matter. God knows, in the last 40, 50 years. And the man's an architect, but it looked like a dump. Now you wonder about that. Why? Why would he not redo his house? So that brings up certain questions. You don't want people in, construction workers, because maybe God knows what they would find in that house,
Oh, yeah, that. And I think he was doing different things with his spare time as well.
Yes, absolutely. it brings up a whole other issue of what was going on in that house. And now there's been talk about how much did his wife know, Asa Ellerup. So Asa married him. I guess they met in high school, but I know that she has family in Iceland, I believe, and she travels there often. They have 2 kids. I can't remember the older boy's name, but there's a boy, he's about 32 years old, and he's a special needs. But that's Asa's son that Rex adopted as his own. And then Rex and Asa had a child, Victoria Heuermann, who's, I believe, 26, 27 years old. From what I understand from all the affidavits and the bail documents and everything, when these murders were taking place, if they took place in the family home, and I believe some of them did, it is when the family was away. You know, Asa and her 2 children, their 2 children were never really in the house, supposedly, when these murders took place. And from what I understand, these murders may have taken place in the basement. So that's where we're at. Yeah.
That is what it sounds like. They seem to have released quite a bit of information. Now, when I say released, I mean it's in the affidavits, it's in the search warrants. It's not like they made a press release and said, here's our evidence. But this is the stuff they've told us. I think devastating.
Oh, it's horrifying. Hollywood could not make up a horror story like this. I mean, it's absolutely horrifying. July 13th, 2023, he was arrested for 3 murders. He was arrested for the murder of Amberlynn Costello, Megan Waterman, and Melissa Bartholomew. They hadn't had the evidence yet for Maureen Brainerd Barnes, but it was imminent. And people who had been following this case knew that it was coming down the pike. Now, the way that he was arrested, for anybody that's unfamiliar with how this came to be and how the police pounced on him and knew that they had their man, they had a lot of stuff. They had the car identified by March of 2022. They knew what car he had, the green Chevy Avalanche, and it was a specific type of car. I think it was a 2002 Chevy Avalanche, and they tied it to him. They also had the cell phone data. They had the area that he lived in. They had DNA, obviously, and what they did was they started following him, and they found where he worked. They knew that cell phone calls were coming from the Massapequa Park area, but also from Midtown Manhattan, where his office was.
Oh, I did not know that.
They followed him, and they needed to get his DNA. And one day, he was eating pizza. It was pizza crust in a pizza box. He had dumped it in a garbage pail not too far from his office in Midtown Manhattan. Police turn around, follow him, go into the garbage, pick up that pizza box, pick up the crust, test the crust, has his DNA on it. And that's how they tied him. You know, and you talk about DNA genealogy and 23andMe. I mean, it all comes into play now, you know. And once they had his DNA, everything started coming together.
I have to do my plug for opting in at GEDmatch. If you want to have your DNA help solve crimes, you have to decide to opt in so that you can share that. And people, no one's touching your DNA.
Yep.
It looks like a computer list of letters and numbers. They're not actually playing with your DNA. They really aren't.
Yep.
Yeah, so many people say, I don't want them in my DNA. No. It's on the computer. It's not actual biological spit or hair or whatever.
Yeah.
They got him good. I hate to give away trade secrets here, but there's been a number of serial killers that were caught from getting their DNA from pizza.
Yes. Think about that. Wow. The technology. It's mind-blowing. Yeah, I agree with you. You know, people talk about the negative about 23andMe, but there's more positives than negatives. People talk about privacy, but think about it. You could be instrumental in helping catch a killer. Your DNA.
Getting a killer, rapist, whoever, off the streets far outweighs the I'm concerned about my DNA, in my opinion, anyway. My brother felt that way. And I've said, hey, hon, I'm out there. So it's already out there. Yes. I said, I'm helping. If there's some crazy loon in one of my branches somewhere in the distant ether, please identify that person.
Yes. Yeah, I'm going to give a plug to Orthram. Kristen and David Middleman, they run Orthram DNA Laboratories, and I believe that they are working on this case, actively working on this case with Suffolk County Police
Really?
Department and helping to, identify more victims. It's funny because, like, boy, I think about July 13th, July 14th, 2023, and how he was identified with these three victims, Amber Lynn Costello, Megan Waterman, Melissa Bartholomew, and Maureen Brainerd Barnes. That identification, that tie to Rex Heuermann was coming down the pike. But, all this stuff is coming out about Rex Heuermann, how he has property in Las Vegas, he has property in South Carolina, his brother is in South Carolina, I think he has property in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, possibly. So now they start looking at missing women there, or women that are deceased and unidentified, or how their killers are still not caught in those states. And now all these rumors are starting to circulate about maybe he's responsible for those, So now the County Police Department is trying to work with different police jurisdictions all throughout the country. The FBI has now stepped in, and holy cow, we could be looking at another Ted Bundy. I think about that and I'm like, my goodness, this guy could be responsible for so many murders. And that was a year ago. And now here we are a year later. And the connection to Maureen Brainerd Barnes was made. They identified Karen Bragada. He has not been tied to that murder yet, but who knows? And she was another one whose body parts were found on Gilgo Beach. But he's also been tied now to Jessica Taylor and Sandra Castilla, who are two other victims. Their body parts were found in Gilgo Beach, but most of their body and their remains were found in Manorville, and that's where they were killed. So you're dealing with different areas of Long Island now.
We now know there are definitely multiple dump sites.
Oh, yes. And I think what's important to note for your audience is what came out in court on June 6th. And I went to Riverhead County Criminal Court building on June 6th because I knew that was going to be a big day in court. There's been a lot of court dates that he's had appearances since his original arrest last year, but a lot of them have just been updates. But I knew that I had to be in court on June 6th because I knew that he was going to be charged with 2 more crimes. So I knew it was going to be a big day in court, and it was. But I think the thing that really blew everybody away was that he had a manifesto, and that came out in the bail application documentation that was presented in court that day.
I want you to know, I'm sitting here with just chills all of a sudden, just ice through my body.
You talk about a detailed and organized serial killer. He fit the bill. It just blows me away how much research he did. I mean, I could go through the bail application with you, but he talks about pre-killing, the post-killing. He talks about how to target his victims. He talks about what he's going to do when he gets his victims and how he's going to kill them. And then he talks about how he's going to dispose of them. And I'm sorry, I don't want to get too graphic, but he talks about how he cleans out the body cavities, how he needs to decapitate them, and how he needs to cut off their legs and their arms and their feet and dispose of them in other areas so he doesn't get caught. You and I were both at CrimeCon, okay? You and I both met John Douglas from the FBI, okay? He started the Criminal Behavioral Science Unit, and for anyone that's not familiar, I mean, this man is a pioneer of the FBI. He really got into the whole psychology and how to really get into the psychology of serial killers and how serial killers think and how they target their victims and how to really identify serial killers and profile them.
How to do it in a way where the psychology is useful to law enforcement.
Yes.
It's wonderful to sit there and say, oh, well, he's a narcissist or he's a psycho. Well, that's nice, but how do you go about finding this guy?
Yeah.
Well, John Douglas says to understand the artist, you have to look at the art.
That's right.
And just the designation of organized, disorganized, and mixed in going through that and determining, what happened here. Was it just haphazard? Someone just took an opportunity and picked up a knife from somebody's kitchen? Or were they bringing duct tape? Did they have gloves with them? Did they write everything down in a manifesto? Thank you very much, which is so handy in prosecuting this guy. That was John Douglas who worked with that, and Rob Ressler and Ann Burgess. I mean, we had Douglas and Ann Burgess together in
I know.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, pinch me. It was amazing.
Well,
But go ahead, I interrupted.
no. The reason I bring that up, why I brought him up, I mean, here, both of us met him on, I believe it was Friday, May 31st. But now in this manifesto that I'm reading, John Douglas's name is in the manifesto because Rex Heuermann read his book Mindhunter and read some of his other books. And it's in the manifesto. He actually studied John Douglas to become a better serial killer. And I'm like, oh my God, I just met this man. And now there's the connection between John Douglas and Rex Heuermann. I mean, it just blew my mind. Yeah,
It is frightening to me that we have the continued research looking into serial killers, and then it gets published and books get written. And is it helping become a better serial killer?
Yeah.
It's chilling to think about that. Well, fortunately, I guess, I think a lot of these guys don't do what Heuermann did, but there's been enough indicators that, you do find serial killer books in the home of serial killers.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And now I'm listening to the press conference that took place after his court appearance on June 6th. Ray Tierney is talking about it. And I just couldn't help myself. I reached out to John Douglas that day and I said, I just want you to know that this is what transpired, that this man had a manifesto and he talked about you in the manifesto, and Suffolk County District Attorney is in a press conference right now talking about you as we speak. And he said it doesn't surprise him at all, that this happens quite often. I mean, the irony of it all, it just blew my mind away, and yeah, that was something that came out in his manifesto. So he is charged with 2 more killings. I'm sure that there's going to be more to come, unfortunately, or fortunately, now that they have him behind bars.
Yeah, I think there'll be a lot more. I have to agree with you. And I think this is going to go way beyond Long Island.
Oh, absolutely. I can't imagine that wouldn't. There's questions that are coming up now. Investigators are now starting to rethink a lot of things. And one of the things is the dead prostitute from just outside of Atlantic City, New Jersey. I believe there were 4 victims. They were killed in the same manner. And their bodies were found in the same manner as Gilgo Beach. There's a lot of similarities there. So investigators, I think, are now looking at that and seeing if possibly that, he may have had some links to that.
Only have to shoot down the Garden State Parkway.
Yeah. Yep, that's right.
Waterfront, beaches.
Yes, waterfront, that's right. Yes, absolutely. So crazy. So John Ray is an attorney that represents the estate of Shannon Gilbert, and he just recently came out with a press conference. I believe I want to say it was on Thursday or maybe Friday, and he's trying to make a connection now between Victoria Heuermann, Rex Heuermann's daughter, and Rex, that she may have had some knowledge of what was taking place in the house because there was some artwork that was shown. Victoria Heuermann did some paintings, some artwork that shows bodies that are decapitated, hands are cut off, feet are cut off. It was a crazy press conference, and I don't know. I think John Ray is stretching a little bit there, but he's trying to stay relevant in the media. And if anyone that doesn't know John Ray, I call him the Long Island Johnny Cochran. He's very colorful, and he's been involved in this case because he represents the estate of Shannon Gilbert, but he's trying to make some alignments between Rex Heuermann and possibly being involved in Shannon's murder, and he's also trying to make some connections there between Victoria Heuermann and Rex and how culpable she is. And I don't know.
That makes me uncomfortable. It just makes me uncomfortable. As far as I can tell so far, the wife and children were not home when at least some of the murders took place, if not all of them. And that is a deliberate choice by Heuermann. Yes. So I don't feel comfortable with basically calling the daughter an accomplice.
I agree. Here's the thing, John Ray likes to go a little bit over the top. So he likes to make allegations that sometimes aren't necessarily have any basis in truth. So we'll see how this goes. I feel that John Ray is losing credibility by giving these types of press conferences. Because for anyone that knows the case, you have to sit there and he's making all these statements that are just loony. So I don't know. I was a little upset about his press conference because he was just making a lot of statements that I don't think hold any weight. and he's trying to make connections that aren't necessarily there.
Listen, he's got his agenda. He wants to keep Shannon's name out there and involved. And I'm certainly not going to forget about Shannon.
Yes.
But rooted in the facts, stop speculating. And it really, until there's some concrete whatever, leave the family alone.
Yes, I agree. And Shannon's family has been through so much.
Yeah.
People say that case is closed, and they've explored all avenues of that case, but I just hope that her family gets justice. I hope that they reopen that case because there's a lot there. It was not investigated the right way the first time. And I hope that Ray Tierney will give that family justice by looking at that case again and reinvestigating it and looking at the evidence, because they want to say that she died of accidental drowning, of getting caught up in the brush. But I'm sorry. I will always stand by the fact that I don't believe that she died accidentally. I believe that there was more there than meets the eye. I think that she may have, in fact, been murdered. And I stand by that.
Yeah, so. I just want the truth.
Yes, exactly.
And I understand what a big ask that is. Because and we don't always get what we want.
That's right.
But this isn't over. Thank you for coming on and talking about all of this and summarizing things so beautifully.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot more coming down the pike. And I think your advocacy for the families, the victims, and just informing us, me, my listeners, your listeners. Tell me about My True Crime Obsession.
Oh, thank you. So, yes, I've been attending CrimeCon since 2018. CrimeCon's been around since 2017. I missed the first year of CrimeCon because I only found out about it, I think, a week after it happened. My friends were like, "Did you go to CrimeCon?" I'm like, "What's CrimeCon?" And they explained it to me. I said, "Oh, my goodness." I said, "I can't believe I missed it."
Same. I did exactly the same thing.
Yeah, so I started attending CrimeCon. My first one was 2018, excuse me, in Nashville. And what I love about CrimeCon is the victims advocacy groups that are there, that it's all about the victims. People are like, "Oh, is it like Comic-Con? Like, can you dress up?" And I'm like, absolutely not. I said, you have to understand, this is focused on the victims. It's focused on solving crimes. You have people there from all different facets of law enforcement. You have victims or victims' family members in the audience that they're looking for answers. And so I just became so energized by it and just so passionate about it that I decided, you know what, I need to do something with this, because I've been studying crimes for quite some time and trying to get the word out there about certain crimes and missing people. And I said, I need to really just start something. And so from that's where the roots of My True Crime Obsession emerged. I started a Facebook group, My True Crime Obsession, and you can find it right on Facebook. And from there, I started to branch out a little more. When Rex Heuermann got arrested last year, everyone's like, "Christine, you have to start a podcast." I said, okay, well, let me see what I can do. And I met somebody actually at Massapequa. He said, I do recordings in a studio. You should use the studio. And I said, okay. And I just started doing some recordings. My podcast just started last year. It's very crude, but there's a lot to learn. There's a big learning curve, but I'm learning as I go. And I like to focus on crimes that are pretty central to Long Island, but there are other crimes as well. But a lot of my attention is focused on the Rex Heuermann case.
You are my LISK expert.
Thank you.
There's no question.
Expert I am, but I'd be happy to share with you. I have the link to the bail application from his June 6th court appearance, and I'll be happy to share that with you if you want to share it out to your audience. It is public information. But it gives you information about his arrest last June 6th and Sandra Castillo and Jessica Taylor. And it also gives information about his manifesto, and it really gets into deep detail. We just kind of covered the surface stuff today. But if you want to find out about the manifesto, I can provide that link for you.
Oh, absolutely. I will put it on my blog when this goes out, and I'll make sure that people have access to it and to your podcast. Yeah, I can't thank you enough.
Oh, well, thank you. It was an honor. I really appreciate it. I appreciate having the opportunity to speak with you about this. I'm just going to leave it on this note that if any of your listeners reflect on this case, please remember it's always about the victims. Please keep them in your thoughts and prayers. Please keep their family members in your thoughts and prayers, because they're still fighting for justice and they're still waiting for answers. And they're finally getting their day in court. and I hope that Rex Heuermann will pay for his crimes. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Christine.
All right.
You have a wonderful rest of your day. We'll be in touch, girl. I love
All
you.
right. Sounds good. Love you right back. All right.
All
Take
right.
care. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Well, that was my interview with Christine Dana. And please check out her podcast, My True Crime Obsession. It's on YouTube. I will also link it on my blog. She is so remarkable. We met at CrimeCon Nashville in 2018. My voice is still not good from CrimeCon, guys. I'm trying. I really am trying here. And she is just a remarkable human being and in it for the right reasons. Ethical podcasting in true crime is really, really important. Oh, and to get more information on the Gilgo Beach victims, check out my episodes on the Lost Girls, episodes 24 to 26, and the minicast, Let the Games Begin. The trials might be over, but the investigation is just kicking in as Fred Cray endeavors to heat up this cold case, Unbroken, the suspicious death of Aladar, and the end of horse racing's golden age. Episode 96, Legacy, will drop next week. Do not miss this conclusion or my follow-up interview with Fred Cray, episode 97, Theriacide, where Fred shares what he didn't include in the book. And I love it when the authors let us peek behind the curtain. Well, thank you for listening, Murder Bookies. I see you as you hear me. Take a few minutes to leave an awesome review that will help me make some new Murder Bookies, and share your thoughts with me at Jill@MurderShelfBookClub.com, on Twitter X, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or join Patreon for $4 a month. Links are on my blog at www.MurderShelfBookClub.com with sources, photographs, show notes, and anything else like links to Rex Heuermann's affidavit that Christine is going to send me. Always trust your gut and lock your doors and windows. Written and produced by Jill, all rights reserved. Music, The Pewter Elephant by Blue Dot Sessions.